Good morning. It's kind of tough to follow someone with such a cool accent. I'm from Texas, and you're going to get a little bit different here. So I'm here to talk about technology that keeps you moving. Great team. Everyone here has a great team, or they wouldn't have probably made the cut. But the technology spun out of UT Southwestern Medical School in Dallas, Texas, with Rajiv and Dave. I met them in the fall of 2018. We formed the company in 2019. We lucked out getting some great team members in town in Dallas with orthopedic device, medical experience, John Tepper, and then Mary, and have grown the team with a lot of industry experience from there. The problem we're going to talk about is infections on metal implants. Our first indications include knees, hips, shoulders. We will get into spine and other applications. The main problem is biofilm, and y'all are familiar with biofilm because you brush it off your teeth every day. It's very easy to open your mouth and mechanically remove the biofilm from your teeth, but you're also going to floss, and you're probably going to, get some Listerine. The catch is when you do that on a metal implant, it's a surgical procedure to open the knee site that you could really simply do with your mouth, okay? So the catch there is a surgical intervention. It's also very difficult to get to all sides of the implant. The first level of care is essentially equivalent to that toothbrushing, but you can't really floss, get out cracks and crevices. It's a $500,000 lifetime cost of care, and the scary part is there's a higher death rate than prostate cancer once you've been indicated with a PJI, a prosthetic joint infection, and it's just under breast cancer. So it's a very high death rate. And if you survive, there's a 26% chance, almost as high as an amputation of that limb. The target indication initially is that DARE procedure, that surgical washout, but we will also be targeting prophylactic treatment, especially for those patients with a very high risk of infection with compromised immune systems. The market's large. There's millions of knees and hips. There'll be 1.2 million new knees and put in human patients in the U.S. alone, double that worldwide. There's about 650,000 U.S. hips new this year, and there's about 15 million total. So the most common knee infection happens within 3 to 6 months of the original implant. But if you have a compromised immune system, you can have an infection years later. And some of y'all may have heard if you have a dental procedure, that infection may travel elsewhere. That's often where it happens. And if you have a compromised immune system due to cancer or diabetes or some other comorbidity, the odds of that infection settling on the implant site is disturbingly high. I mentioned the standard of care, those DARE procedures, revision procedures, which is where they physically cut out the bone, remove the implant, put in a spacer, and then they put in a new implant later. It's very invasive. And the catch I mentioned, this is high morbidity patients with other compromised immune problems. The market, as I mentioned, is large. This is an indication of where we're going. We believe it's a $100 million market with a modest set of the first 50 devices. The average DARE procedure volume for a fellowship-trained orthopedic surgeon in the U.S., they do about 1/3 of their procedures are implant infections for these specialists. That's about 400 of the 8,000 U.S. orthopedics, and the average there is about $1.36 million in our reimbursement rate target infection for each of those surgeons. So it scales about $1 to $1.3 to $1.5 million per surgeon per year for those indications. The technology here is an alternating magnetic field device. It's non-invasive, and if someone says alternating magnetic field device, it sounds pretty, that sounds familiar. Well, an MRI, a magnetic resonance imaging device, is a magnetic field. We're doing it a little bit differently. When they tell you to take off jewelry to get in an MRI, or they ask if you have metal in your body, it's because those implants can heat up unpredictably. They're trying to image the body's soft tissue and stuff. We're trying to leverage that heating for therapeutic effect. We do have one PCT patent in the U.S. Actually, that's two. I need to update that. I just got the new one since this slide was submitted. We have 3 pending after that and 4 provisional filings, and the PCTs actually covers 7 countries, including the U.S. One thing we found out early, we had to prove that we did not disrupt the standard of care use of antibiotics. We didn't necessarily think that there would be a synergistic effect, but we realized that the heating effect, once we tested this in vitro, that there's a heating effect combined with the antibiotics that creates a stair-step kind of improvement rate, a stepwise improvement of the use of antibiotics. That's actually helpful. We had to prove we did not disrupt the use of antibiotics. We didn't expect to show synergy, but that allows us to use more modest thermal doses and have a very great effect. You notice the line down there at the bottom on all studies, both on the in vitro and then the sheep studies, the infection rate, even after 21 days, reached down to the point that was, approached the limits of detection of infection in both animal and in vitro models. Our magic, when it comes down to it, is shaping the field. Actually, turns out we made a crazy decision when we decided to start knees first, because the knee implant's one of the most convoluted geometry devices you can place in the body. We started there first because it's the biggest market. It forced us to solve how to shape the field for very convoluted geometry, which we did, and we have a very even therapeutic dose on the shape of the implants. Not just on the shape of an A implant, but the shape of multiple implants with one transducer. You see there's a very even heat distribution on those implants, which is what we're leveraging. We also have the ability to dial that dose up and down. You see the target dose for an acute infection is right around 70 to 75. That's the reason we determined that, because the bacteria that we've identified on implants die between 45 and 50 degrees Celsius. MRSA being a little bit more heat resistant, so you need to dial it up to a higher dose. Within 90 seconds with a 10-degree temperature, increased heat, you notice that lower temperature on that upper curve is about 65 degrees. With about 2 minutes dose of that temperature, you have a 2 to 3 log order kill on the surface of the implant. You can dial it down lower. It depends upon the bacterial species and also depends upon the level of log order you want to kill. But the dose, shaping the field and then shaping it for a targeted dose is the magic of what we do. The clinical and reimbursement model, it's in our outpatient device. You see it placed over the implant site. It is non-contact completely. It's just generating the field from outside of it. There are flexible treatment options. As showed on the previous page, you have different dose levels and different shapement effects. We do create a different device for each indication. That knee device is about 12 inches by 12 by 18. A hip implant, mainly because hips tend to be a little bit larger than knees, is about a 35 centimeter device using some different measurements. The economics appear to be settling in the device lease plus $7,500 per treatment model. That's largely because as an adjunct to a DARE procedure at about $115,000, it's a modest addition. But for patients who have recurring or chronic infection problems, the ability to treat them monthly, potentially for the rest of the life, falls below the $30,000 per month typical reimbursement that includes for a U.S. Medicare service. This is the device, the initial device called the Sola 2. It's a Sola version A 2,000 watt unit. The knee implant transducer uses about 1,400 watts. A hip implant would be about 1,800 watts, but we'll dial it down for a tibial nails about 800 watts. So using the appropriate dose that can generate that kill is the target. We did receive early on an FDA breakthrough device designation. We have just been approved probably about 4 weeks ago for our first in human treatment, and we're actively negotiating with a couple of 2 different investigational review boards, and we hope to have our first patient on the table here in the next 30 days, probably in the Dallas area. From a timeline, we starting the first in human feasibility trials, then we'll go into pivotal trials. Current discussions with the FDA suggesting that we might be able to step directly into the pivotal trials. The first in human is a safety study starting at 50 degrees Celsius. It's about 5 degrees above bath water, hot bath water. That indicates about a 1 log order kill. Then we're going to step up to 60 degrees, then 70 degrees, and start pursuing the pivotal trial. It's likely to be a transition directly in there if the first indications don't show any negative events. The main work going on there is ongoing transducer expansion, and that's the knees, hips, so forth. Prior investors include Johnson & Johnson as our lead investor. They've invested $5 million. We currently have a bridge round underway, and we're looking to add funds to that, and then we head into the Series B. This is the first-in-human patient indication, PGI indication on a knee, a DARE adjunct, that's debridement, antibiotics, and implant retention. That's that surgical brush out, toothbrushing kind of equivalent procedure. It's a great place to start because unfortunately, even with that surgical intervention, there's about a 37% relapse rate, 37 to 44% relapse rate. That basically means they didn't treat the infection effectively and they got to do it again. And it'll start on a 50-degree dose. It's a modest step up, kind of doing a dose response study, 50, 60, and then 70 degrees in those first indications. Thank you for listening to the Solenic Medical Story.